started. Somebody had to finish eating their dinner. Good evening and welcome to the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting of Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. Looks like we got a quorum here, so we shall convene. John, did we warn this meeting properly?
Yes, we did, Daniel.
That's good. All right. Our first order of business is to approve minutes. We have minutes from November 12th, 2024 and November 19th of that same year. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
If you want a motion.
Yes, please.
My motion is that we approve the minutes from November 12th and 19th as presented.
Great. Franz has made a motion to approve the minutes of November 12th and 19th as presented. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Next up is Chair's remarks. I have none. Going to move on to manager's comments.
I have a few. I just wanted to thank the 18 DPW staff who worked anywhere from 5 to 12 hours each on the holiday on Thanksgiving to keep the roads and sidewalks clear of snow. I think they had 4 inches downtown and 9 inches up in the higher elevations. Just really appreciate how the DPW staff are ready at any time to step up and help us all be safe on the roads and keep the utilities and the facilities going. So thank you to all of them. Wanted to remind everyone there are several vacancies on town boards and committees, including the Energy Committee, the Conservation Commission, and the Arts Committee. So if you're interested in volunteering and helping out your town, please look for application information on brattleboro.gov. Another way to volunteer with the town is to consider representing your neighbors at the special representative town meeting to be held on Thursday, December 12th at the Academy School Gym in West Brattleboro. At that meeting, the town representatives will be deciding whether to uphold or disapprove the amendment to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Chapter 13, Article 9, on acceptable community conduct as adopted by the Select Board on September 17th. There are 16 open seats in District 7, 7 open seats in District 8, and 3 open seats in District 9. The districts will be caucusing at 5:15 p.m. on the 12th at Academy School, and that they will fill the seats then. The meeting will then be at 6 p.m. in the same vicinity. So for more information on the ordinance change, please visit brattleboro.gov/pending ordinances. And the final thing I wanted to mention was that 23 town staff have now completed the 24-hour of critical incident stress management training for first responders. This is a training program put together by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. It's nationally recognized and was taught here by 2 Vermont clinicians. The training prepares staff to be part of a team that can recognize when someone shows signs of stress and needs the assistance of a clinician. Staff from town departments ranging from police, fire, and DPW, as well as library, rec and parks, and planning participated in this training, and they're now able to identify incidents that may cause a person to need a plan for special care. So that's it.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Okay, other board, let's move on to select board comments and committee reports. It feels like it's been a long time since we had a board meeting. Was it just a week?
I don't think so. I think it was
2 weeks?
Yeah.
We had some days off. I lost my rhythm. Select board comments and or committee reports. Franz.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, as John mentioned, the representative town meeting coming up next week. Very important discussion of the behavioral ordinance that we passed here some time ago. There's been a lot of discussion about it, including today's newspaper. I just hope everybody, town meeting representatives for sure, but everybody, I hope, is paying attention and forming their opinions and sharing their opinions and having a robust discussion about this. Now, part of that is tomorrow for people who are District 8 representatives. I live in District 8. And I'm planning on attending the meeting that's at 5:30 in this room tomorrow, being led by Gary Stroud, the chair of our district caucus, to talk about presumably mostly the the Downtown Safety Ordinance. So I hope people will take advantage of that opportunity as well. But the real reason I'm saying all this is that it's going to cut into my office hours at the Works tomorrow, where I meet with people from 4:30 to 6:30 on Wednesdays. I'm going to have to meet until 5:30 tomorrow, so please do come and talk to me. We may have to keep the discussion a little more brief than usual. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Franz. Anyone else? Okay. We're going to move on to public participation. This is the part of the meeting where a person could speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda. I didn't give my usual preamble about conduct and how to participate in this meeting, so I shall do so now. Be respectful, listen to one another, don't interrupt one another, don't heckle one another, and I will give you up to 3 minutes, and sometimes people need to speak more than once, and usually those requests are honored provided we have enough time in our agenda. So with that being said, I'll recognize people, and that includes folks on Zoom. So let's do it like this. We'll go George, Dick, Kate, and then Robert. So if you come to the microphone, state your name, where you live, and then expound for up to 3 minutes.
Okay, is this...
And it doesn't project in here. Well, sometimes
Oh,
it
it doesn't,
actually.
okay.
Yeah, it's mostly for BC.
So, my name is George Karabakakis. I'm the CEO of HCRS. I live in Brattleboro, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to say a few words. I don't know if 3 minutes is enough, but I will, if anyone knows me, that might be a challenge. Having said that, I want to express my support for the Brattleboro Police Department. I think the police department is doing a wonderful job, and I think the leadership of Chief Hardy has been outstanding. Her vision and her leadership, I think, has allowed the department to hire Justin Johnson, who I want to say that his lived experiences, his personal experiences have really allowed him, have really created opportunities to connect with people, to really help people connect to services, to have hope, to have a sense of possibility in this community. And so I want to thank Chief Hardy. I want to thank all of you, certainly, and I think it's really made a difference. So, and I know there's many other officers that I could name, and I have to say that I know I would miss someone. So but I just want to say that it's been it's really been positive. So I want to thank you all for that, and certainly Chief Hardy. And so that's pretty much it. Thanks, you all.
George.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Dick?
Kudos to what was just said. Dick DeGray, District 8. A couple of things. I believe our finance director is leaving, Kim Frost, and I would like to wish her well in whatever endeavors she's off to do. She's been enjoyable to work with and talk with, so I certainly wish her the very best. Having said that, the .gov, when I go, and I mentioned this several months ago, when I go to the web page and I hit the 25, hit this year's budget, and I look for the line items, the actuals, what's going on in the budget, they're not there. When you received your first financial update, 3-month update, back in October, I had asked the board to go back to a monthly report. I applaud the chairman for asking the board if they wanted to do that. Disappointed that none of you wanted to do that. So I'm going to ask you, in the monthly report from the department heads, that the monthly financial report that used to come out be put in the monthly report. So if you guys want to look at it, that's great. But I know I want to look at it. And I'd rather do it that way than go through the Freedom of Information Act and have the Finance Department issue that every month.
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable request. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dick. As we're kind of in budget season, I was also looking on our budget page for actuals, and it's hard to get. And so, John, I don't know if there's any work that we can do behind the scenes to have that information be more readily available.
I'll look into it.
Yeah, thank
We're
you.
going to be downstaffed, so.
Yeah, okay. All right. Maybe that's something we can kind of talk about the next time we have a meeting where the budget's a topic. Great. Kate?
Hello, I'm Kate Traskis, Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, and also District 7. I wanted to also give a shout out of gratitude and thanks to our Public Works Department. Dan and Pete and Darren have been amazing, as always, in helping us turn over downtown with our holiday display, and really can't do it without them. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. And next up is Bob on Zoom.
And I think I'm there.
Yep.
And now you can probably see me at some point. So let me just say two things, I think, and one very briefly. Oh, sure. Robert Ozer, and I am District 9. And we already had our meeting. But so just two things very briefly, I think. One is to just continue on with the kudos to the Department of Public Works. And we had a washout on our street, and Darren Pacheco actually came down and did a site visit. So it was really great to see that involvement with the community here. And we definitely appreciated the snow plowing. And also a reach out to the police for some of the incidents recently that have been very challenging, to say the least. Speaking of challenging, in a way, last Monday, I attended by Zoom a state committee meeting. And it's been bothering me for the last week, having been to that meeting. And some people from Brattleboro had presented a proposal at that meeting. And two board members, one who is a committee member in that state committee and one not, were very vociferous, or one was vociferous and the other on paper was vociferous against the proposal. And I understand that all these proposals may not have all the pieces that we should have. But I think it's bad when you have a state committee and Brattleboro becomes the center because of our disputes. I was reading something today where there was a line that said, partnership with others is the way to best serve the public. And I would hope that that committee, that state committee, the representatives at this table who were there would reach out, would not say, oh, let them reach out to us, but would reach out and try to figure out what the partnership would look like. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, going to move on to the consent agenda. John, would you just give us a run through on that?
Yep, there's 4 items on your consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be approving a first-class liquor license for the Royal Diner located at 487 Marlborough Road. You'll be accepting and appropriating a $13,000 Justice Assistance Grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance to underwrite the town's 2025 payment for the firearms simulation system. You'll be accepting the Chamber of Commerce's request to extend free parking for holidays through Sunday, December 8th. And you'll be approving change order number 7 in the amount of approximately $7,000 and 143 contract days for various cost increases and credits for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility upgrade project.
Great. Thank you, John. Any board members wish to pull an item from that consent agenda for consideration at the end of our regular agenda? No? Okay. Seeing none, I'd accept a motion.
Motion.
Yep.
that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Great. Peter made a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, that passes. So we will move on, and we are going to old business. And I believe Sue Fillion is going to spend a great deal of time with us sitting at that table this evening. So settle in. We don't have a rocking chair for you or anything.
It's okay.
A little cozy fire. So the first thing we've got here in old business is a change to our ordinances. This is for Appendix C, and it relates, well, it's changed to our parking ordinances and relates to Appendix C.
Yes.
Would you like to walk us through it, Sue?
Sure. Thank you. So this is a second hearing on parking ordinance amendment to Appendix C. I first presented this, I think, at the November 12th meeting. That was the first hearing. So these changes come to the Select Board with the recommendation of the Traffic Safety Committee. There are a series of changes that were recommended based on safety action requests that we've been receiving, based on neighborhood conversations with businesses and residents in that area. And they're also based on some of the things that the town did this fall to help improve the parking and circulation in the area between Exit 2 and the western leg of William Street, so just past the Vermont Country Deli. So essentially, they are requesting that the first one is to prohibit parking on the northern side of Western Ave between Brattle Street and Orchard Street. That is surprisingly not something that is in the current ordinance, and over the summer and into the fall, people were parking on that side until the town put out temporary orders for no parking there. So we want to codify that. The second is to prohibit parking on William Street between the intersection of Western Avenue and Larkin Street. There's currently signs on the eastern side of the road. This would apply to both sides of the road, and this was also a measure that we undertook during the fall to organize the parking a little bit more. And then we're also recommending that we allow on-street parking between the eastern leg of William Street to about 406 Western Avenue. So it's this area, it currently has a no parking sign, and it's that way in the ordinance, but there's a wide shoulder there, and it kind of looks like a parking lane. So the idea is in exchange for restricting parking on William Street, we'll open up this area a little bit more, and I think 4 or 5 cars can generally fit in there. And then the last piece of it is to prohibit parking on both sides of Larkin Street. That currently doesn't have a parking restriction. It's very narrow, and so when people are parking on that street, it makes it difficult for the residents to get through. There were no changes to the proposed ordinance from the hearing in November, and so that's a summary of it.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Board members, Elizabeth?
Thank you, Sue. And as a member of the Traffic Safety Committee, I applaud this measure. The parking in and around the Vermont Country Deli has been quite a contentious issue, but this has been worked out amicably and with the support of both the neighbors and the deli, and I think we should move on it.
Do you think it's so much that you'd like to make a motion?
I would.
Great.
Let's see. I move to adopt the changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Appendix C, Regulations Governing the Control of Traffic, Article 2, Parking, Section 16-100, No Marking Areas, as presented.
Thank you, Liz. Any of the board members with comment on this second reading of this ordinance change? No? Okay, let's go to the public. Any members of the public with comment on this proposed change to our parking ordinances? Hello? If you come and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Judy Daly, one of the owners of the Vermont Country Deli. And I first want to thank you all for bringing this forward. Like everyone said, we're working toward this for everyone's benefit. So the signs that were up temporarily that enforce this proposal have been very effective and helpful. It will be very great to get back the spaces along the avenue that we used to have for parking. And that helps. We do have a shortage, and we continue to work towards relieving that in any way that we can going forward. I'm curious. The little orange signs have been awesome. And I just hope that that's considered in the signage going forward to help the public know the new ordinance. Because I know that they've in the past ignored the old signage that was there. And it's been working great. And so I hope that the new signage can be as effective as the temporary signage was. Because that's been really helpful. And
Great.
Thank you all for.
Thanks, Judy. Sue, can you speak to the signage?
Not really.
Okay.
I don't know if they come from the police department or public works, so
Yeah.
I actually don't know. I mean, typically with no parking, DPW would install the regular signposts in the manner that the MUTCD, which governs road signage, is. So I think maintaining the orange signs would be something additional.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think what I heard was like clear signage so that people know what's up.
I can definitely share that.
I'd like to think that the kind of standards for that are producing clear signage, but I do see people, there's like striping that happens, right? Like people understand means no parking, and yet. Okay, great. Any other members of the public we wish to comment? Yes.
Jessica Cole, also owner Vermont Country Deli. We would be willing to pay for the orange signage too, to help with those, if that is something that the town would be helpful.
Okay, that is helpful, most definitely. Noted.
I'll pass that along.
Yes. Great. Anyone else with comment? Okay. Board members, any final comment? Ready to take some action? Yeah.
I just wanted to thank the deli for hiring the traffic control. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Liz made a motion a few minutes ago to adopt changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Appendix C, regulations governing the control of traffic, Article 2, parking, Section 16-100, no marking areas as presented. Are you ready for that question? Seems like it. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Seems to pass 5-0. Wonderful. Okay. Moving on to our second item of old business. We had a vacant building ordinance in the works. This is a second reading of that. And Sue, I believe you're on the hook for that one as well.
Actually, can I invite Steve Hayes?
You can invite Steve Hayes.
Up, who's going
Hi, Steve Hayes.
to help present.
Come on up. So, Steve, we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. So this was warned as a second reading, but we haven't seen this since May, so I figured I would start just by refreshing everyone on what is actually in this thing, and then taking a quick look at what's changed since that reading based on the feedback that we got at that time. And then we would love to hear any feedback that you folks would like to give us as well. So first, we did some work on what a definition of a vacant building actually is. There had been some feedback at the previous meeting with concern about what constitutes vacancy and whether there might be some potential loopholes where very sporadic occupancy, could be used to avoid having to actually register as a vacant building. So we have tightened that up in response to that feedback, and that now reads as after a period of 180 days, any structure that is not continuously occupied by someone who is an authorized person and for a permitted land use, except for specific exemptions that do not generally have constant occupancy, like a summer home or a warehouse or a utility facility. Everything else that doesn't fit that definition is a vacant building. And we did some work as well in tightening up what an authorized person means. But other than that, the major change that happened since our previous meeting was a recommendation on the fee schedule. That was one of the other asks that we had received from the board. And so what we've come back with is a recommendation for the fee to be a flat $1,000 for the year, without a distinction between residential and commercial, or any other type of per square foot or per unit, which were discussed, but we've recommended the just $1,000, which would then double for each year that this property needs to be registered as vacant, until it hits $10,000, and then the increase would just be $5,000, so as to not get to an extremely high charge per year. And that is comparable with some of the other communities in Vermont. Barrie and Rutland have a shorter period that you would need to register by. Burlington has a slightly longer one. But our fees that we are proposing would be comparable to Barrie City, and a bit higher than Rutland, but certainly much lower than Burlington. Since May, we haven't had any major changes to the other sections of the document, like the obligations of the owner or designated agent of a registered vacant building. So those are still mostly boilerplate, coming from a model ordinance that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns provided. And we also require that if a owner of a vacant property is not able to actually respond to requests from the town, that they be designating someone in the area who can do that within 24 hours, although emergency access would, of course, be able to be had regardless of that. The enforcement is pretty much identical to what exists in statute already for a health order or for zoning enforcement. And the main difference here is that this would enable that same kind of enforcement for violations that fall outside of those existing powers for either zoning or for public health. And then we have a few abilities to relieve the fines and fees in this particular ordinance that we've recommended. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are a few types of sporadic occupation that we've exempted specifically so that we wouldn't be charging people fees for having a warehouse or a vacation home. And we've deliberately set the multiple unit vacancy rate at 75%, so that very small duplex 3-unit type residential dwellings would not be actually applicable to this until they're completely empty, because we didn't want to be overly punitive to that sort of small type of housing. And that also, on the other side, is avoiding being overly punitive to larger residential or commercial type properties where there are a low number of vacancies that are just the result of normal economics. So we also have existing language here that allows us to have the discretion to waive those fees or the registration requirement for a time if there's a good faith effort that's been demonstrated that the property is being marketed to rent, to sell, or being renovated in order to do those things. So I believe that is, in essence, responding to everything that we think we heard from the last time that this came up. But we would love to have some feedback on what we've brought for you today.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Board members, questions, comments? Richard?
I think that the penalty is too low, considering it's pretty much a life or death issue. I think it's a miracle that nobody died in the Sportsman's fire. I don't know if McNeil's would have qualified as an abandoned building, but you know, we had a death there and it was sort of abandoned. But I think that the gravity of the situation of an abandoned building, $1,000 doesn't reflect that, and I don't think it would be enough to push a building owner in the direction that we want as quickly as we want. And I would suggest an amendment to change it to $5,000 and then $5,000 a year increase.
Okay. Other board members with comments on that? Liz?
Just a separate comment. So since the time that this ordinance was introduced, 2 of the main vacant buildings are no longer. Do we think that the threat of this ordinance caused those changes?
We think possibly. We don't know for sure. I mean, definitely once this was discussed in May, there seemed to be a bit more activity. But I also think that there was, at least for one of the buildings, there was a little bit more pressure to really clean it up. I mean, they knew this was in the pipeline, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members, questions, comments? Peter?
Yeah. So I don't disagree with Richard. The thing that I'm cautioned about a little bit is I know that this ordinance basically came into play because of things like Sportsman's, like Friendly's, as Liz has pointed out. Those things have gone away, but I think the ordinance is there to prevent future things like this happening, and maybe $1,000 isn't enough to sort of prevent that. But I guess my question, and maybe John or Patrick can answer this, is eventually these fines grow to a point where if they're not paid, does the town then take control of the property, and is that a burden we want?
I'm actually going to defer that to our town attorney, because I think, Bob, you would have a good answer for that.
So these, wherever you set that registration fee is up to you, and trying to find that sweet spot that is enough of an incentive for the owner to get it occupied is the goal there. But there's a difference between the penalty section and the registration fee, because the penalty section, which are civil tickets, have a maximum of $800 per day, okay? And that's set by statute. But that's more for if they don't board up the building and take the precautions that are set forth in the ordinance to keep the property safe from being essentially an attractive nuisance. The registration bit is a fee that if they are not filing that, then we have the option of going to Superior Court, and we would then ultimately, in a worst case scenario, hopefully get a judgment which would then be recorded in the land records as against that property. That would be the way to have the recourse against them long term to recover the money. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up then to that, with that in mind. Does this, with the the one part that I wasn't completely clear on. So you register this place as vacant. And so are we basically just, what we're looking for are people who kind of stop in twice a month, check on a property that has been open for so long, and just some activity that's been going, like a little self-policing? Is that what we're trying to encourage here from a property? I mean, I would think if you want to rent the property, you want the upkeep of the property to be decent so as to be attractive to somebody who might want to take it. And I think if I'm understanding this ordinance correctly, that is what we are trying to achieve here. We're not trying to achieve a Friendly's or a Sportsman's kind of a thing where it just slowly, we're just sort of hoping one day it just sort of sinks into the ground and we don't have to look at it anymore. Does that make sense? Is that more of a statement or a question?
No, I get it. Yeah, I think these guys might have something to say.
Yeah, I think there's multiple objectives. So one is to prevent a building to getting to the point of a Sportsman's or a Friendly's. So give us some teeth where we can enforce on it. And then the other side of that is vacant buildings can be an attractive nuisance in neighborhoods. So first of all, we want to know where they are. That's kind of the registration piece, so that we can keep an eye on them and make sure that they're in good condition, so that they're not affecting all the other properties around it. I was just going to check. Yeah, so it's both trying to, help neighborhoods not have to deal with these difficult, and to kind of prevent buildings that get into such disrepair, to give us some teeth to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So would increasing that fee schedule, does that give you a better set of teeth? Like if we were maybe 5,000 is too high, maybe 1,000 is too low, is something in the middle like a $2,500 fine, or is it just are we being punitive?
There's a fee. That's the fee, and then there's a fine if the property is not kept to a good standard.
I guess I'm referring more to the fine than the fee.
Yeah.
The fine is set by statute, so the $800 per day we can't raise that.
I meant I was more in line with the $1,000 fine.
We call it a registration fee.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, some cities call it a fine, but we realize there's some turnover in uses of buildings. I don't know. We were trying to set it in a way that was, $100 or $200, I think, which is what we talked about the last time. That didn't seem like it's enough to get you to move on your property. So this seemed like it was sufficiently. If you wanted to raise it, you could. I don't know that it necessarily gives us any more teeth.
Mm-hmm. You did research into other municipalities that have these ordinances, and you said that they were in this range. In this range,
Berry City is $500 every 6 months, so that's about $1,000 a year.
Yeah,
right? And then Burlington, what was that like?
I believe it was $1,500 quarterly.
And they're looking to raise it to like $3,000 quarterly. Rutland City was pretty low at 100.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question?
That doesn't seem like much of an incentive.
I'm sort of jumping in on yours.
It's your meeting.
Yeah, it's our meeting. I noticed that you're saying that they charge quarterly for this fee. What was the thinking behind annually? Because that's what's in this ordinance. Presumably you thought that was better.
It's consistent with, some of our business licensing. It's just kind of one time a year. It's a little easier administratively.
Yeah. I think is Richard weigh in here because you started this. I think if going to like a quarterly $1,000 fee might put a little urgency behind it.
Okay. All right, that's sort of on the table. Nobody's making a motion around these, so I'm just kind of like keeping track of them. I don't know who put their hand up first, so Franz, go ahead.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome planners. So I've got a few, this is an area that I just don't feel very familiar with at all, and some of the questions about different amounts, I think it's hard for us to know how this works in general or in other places specifically. I mean, if Rutland does $100 and Burlington's looking to do $3,000 quarterly, that's a pretty big spread. I wonder if you know what their actual experience is and what would be leading them to either keep it low or want to make it significantly higher. Is there something that we need to learn from that experience?
You spoke to Rutland, right?
Yeah, I did not get a great response rate from other communities on this when trying to get a sense of how well this is going for them, but we did definitely hear from Rutland City, who told us that they were enforcing this a lot, and then when COVID happened, they put it on the back burner, and they haven't really taken it back out very much. So I would say that one feels more like it's dormant, and maybe the low comparable fee of just $100 might have something to do with the fact that they don't necessarily feel like it needs to be used if it's not particularly motivating. Whereas Burlington, we may well benefit from trying to get a hold of them again, but the fact that they're trying to move theirs up might suggest that they feel that there is a need for even more severe fees.
Can I ask a question about that? So a lower fee means that, like, it's less, your time to investigate these vacant properties costs money. So if the bang for buck is, we get $100 fee out of it, then it's not really worth our time, right? It costs more than $100
Definitely.
for us to investigate.
The ticketing aspect is still an important piece that this would enable, but I definitely agree with you that it would be not really worth charging something so low as $100.
Okay, great. Elizabeth, are you done?
I've got several, but we can rotate.
Yeah, all right. I got some too.
Okay, so, thank you. This is interesting. I would imagine that the landowner, the property owner, has some issues, and that's why it's vacant. And so we need to hold on to that thought, right? And then they're paying taxes. And if they don't pay taxes, there's consequences for that. And it's basically with real estate a calculation of the economic value and the economic activity in the area, and I'm sure that has more weight than anything that we could do in terms of turning property into something more valuable. So I'm content to let it stay at $1,000, and you can come back to us next year and tell us whether you like it or not, whether it's effective. But I'm cautioned by the fact that, what if it's an abandoned property and it becomes a drug house? What do you do then? You can say, well, we'll board it up, but, squatters or drug users would inhabit the structure, and we'd, again, have a devil of a time getting them out. So that's my concern, and I wondered if you have any comment on that.
Thanks. Sue or Steve, any thoughts on that?
I was
So my gut reaction would be that the range of obligations of the owners or the designated agents of these properties that are in that third section, that those would likely cover any situation of unwanted access or unauthorized access, any broken windows or holes in the building itself. Those are certainly not something that would be satisfactory for the obligations, and so then at that point we would be able to do the ticketing, which is up to $800 a day. Whether the courts actually enforce the maximum is another thing, but we would have the ability to enforce daily tickets based on if there was a property that was abandoned and there was a forced entry. So I believe that those obligations would cover that sort of a situation. And I think it would get potentially to the situation that came up earlier where if there's really no one answering the mail, then eventually it could potentially go to the town as a taking. But
Good, so there is a mechanism.
There is a clause in here where we could request permission from the Superior Court. So if we're ticketing, we're not getting action, we can actually request the Superior Court to demolish the structure and place a lien on the property. I mean, I think all of these things would still be a really long, drawn-out, I think it doesn't necessarily stop that activity from happening immediately. There's nothing here that
Right,
does that.
but the fines may, or...
The fines, court
The
action.
obligations may.
Obligations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Can I ask my question, then I'll come back to you?
Yeah, Richard has one too.
Great. Everyone else has spoken, and I haven't, so I shall ask my question. How many vacant properties do we have in town right now?
Not a ton. I can think of one for sure. There's some, garages and stuff that are attached to, that are in pretty poor condition. I can think of areas that, there's a couple that, exist but are kind of wrapped up in probate. So maybe, we're talking maybe 5 that I'm aware of.
Okay. And the mechanism in which we would come to learn that a building is vacant is what?
Mostly we hear about it from the neighbors.
Yeah.
That's unless they're really visible from the street.
Okay. And so if you heard about a property, you would then sort of like monitor that property for a period of 181 days perhaps, and see whether or not it was in fact vacant?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably going to try to make contact with the property owner, probably send them a letter that says
Steve's
we have
not
this
gonna do
vacant
stakeout.
registration
No.
and, here's the paperwork and kind of follow up from there.
Okay. And those 5 properties that you're thinking of, are they commercial, residential, or a mix?
The ones I'm thinking about are a mix.
Okay. All right. Franz?
Thank you,
And then
Dan.
Richard?
Taking off on that last thing, is there any specific property that is appropriate to mention here that you would say, here's what the problem looks like, here's what we would do about it, or here's what we have done about it, here's why we need an ordinance and whether we can take next steps? I'm just trying to find a practical example that would help me clarify my thinking about all this.
I guess I'm just wondering, is
John?
Franz, I think the 2 that have come up might be good examples for a thought experiment like that.
So what would have been different if this ordinance had been in place for, say, Friendly's or Sportsman's Lounge? What were you doing, and what could you have done differently?
I wasn't involved with the enforcement on Sporties. We were putting a lot of pressure on the property owner to board it up, keep it boarded up, take it down, all those things. We never, there were no tickets, and I don't think there were any health actions that were taken on that property. And kind of similar with Friendly's, we had no teeth. All we could do is just say, hey, when are you going to tear that down? Can you tear it down? Can you? So with both of those situations, they'd both be on the registry, and if they weren't, we'd go ask them to be on the registry, get them to get on the registry, and then we could issue the tickets saying there's overgrown weeds, there's openings, there's all those things. So we'd start the ticketing process.
So they would have actually been looking at the $800 a day, probably. And I don't know about them. I think that would spur me to some action. Do you think that would have helped get these things resolved quicker?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you for that. One of my concerns about this, the letter that you forwarded to us from a homeowner planning some renovations who thought that they might fall afoul of the ordinance, you seem to be reassuring the author of the letter that actually that was going to be okay, that they weren't going to end up in trouble with an ordinance like this. But I wonder if there are other issues you've heard from homeowners, landlords perhaps. Is there anything else out there where this looks like it would pose difficulties for, normal upstanding citizens?
Yeah, so I heard from one property owner in town that was concerned that it can, in the commercial real estate market, that it can take time to find a good tenant. And so it's not always, they're not always able to lease up in the 180-day period, in the 6-month period. And so they expressed concern and thought that a building should be declared vacant after 2 or 3 years.
And what do you think about that?
Well, I personally think that's too long because I think, again, it's not just about the property owner, it's the impacts to the neighbors and the surrounding properties when something is vacant for too long. So, and I think based on our research, we felt comfortable with the 6 months. It's shorter than, it's not much shorter. I think Burlington is 9 months. After 9 months, you're vacant. Other places, it's 3 months, and that seemed too short.
So if there was a commercial property owner who was not finding a suitable tenant, and the 6 months were up, then they could also come to you or somebody and say, hey, I'm really trying to rent this place. Haven't succeeded so far, and we would then waive the fees?
I think if there were...
What would we do?
Yeah, I think if there was good faith efforts, yeah, we could, kind of like the residential, we wouldn't require it to go on to the vacant registry right away. But I think, at what point,
at some point,
it's kind of like somebody doing renovations on their home and they move out and it takes 8 years to complete. There's still impacts to that. So, I think at some point, as long as they're showing good faith efforts to market it.
So there'd be some discretion on the part of your department.
The building officer, yeah.
Building officer.
Or what is it called?
Thank you. Browns, can I move on to Richard?
Yes, please do.
Great. Richard, and then Peter.
Might seem a little petty, but I'm looking at this, and we're calling this $1,000 a permit.
A fee.
It says permit in the language. So
okay.
I just had a little trouble. Maybe it's not a legal issue, but you issue a permit for something that is okay to do usually. And this doesn't seem like. Are we saying
it's requiring a person to register and pay that fee for having a building that is considered vacant? And so the idea here is it's an incentive program. It's not designed to be punitive. It's designed to be an incentive so that we don't have vacant buildings, and so that it doesn't invite public nuisance or attractive nuisances. It doesn't have the fewer vacant buildings you have, the less your grant list is going to be negatively affected by the vacant buildings, etc. So that's why it's determined in here to be a fee. The enforcement part of it is through the penalties and the tickets, and the court route. There's a whole bunch of different parts of this ordinance that can go to the enforcement, but that initial fee is the amount that is what you have to decide as a board, what's going to be that sweet spot as to what's too much, what's too little to encourage that behavior.
Yeah.
I'm just
Thank you.
kind of just focusing in on this word, one word, like.
You'd rather it be a registration fee?
Well, I don't know. It just doesn't seem right to call it a permit because
Well, because what Bob described was a registration fee.
Yeah.
We could certainly change that word.
That makes more sense.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if that, just that language, permit, just bothers me. That's
Okay. I think Steve has something to say.
So I see your point, and I don't think that it would necessarily do anything substantial for us to just change that wording to reflect your point there. But we definitely did use it on purpose. It wasn't an accident.
Okay.
And the sense is that the way that you would have your property be vacant would be maintained in a condition that is permissible, albeit vacant. Mm-hmm. So we're intending to have a steep but not unreasonable fee for that permit that we would hope that you would ultimately choose to get off the roll, but not the enforcement action piece, which is, of course, the fine.
Right. It's permissible provided that you pay this fee and you undertake all of these obligations. Mm-hmm. And if you continue to do that and you allow it to be vacant for a period longer than 1 year, it is continues to be permissible provided in the second year you pay a fine that is now twice as much. And so it is, from a health and safety point of view, keeping the building in a condition that is, acceptable, and it is disincentivizing a longer term vacancy, somewhat. I think the examples of sporties and friendlies, had we had this tool, maybe there would have been swifter resolution of those situations. Maybe. Who can say? Peter.
Yeah. So just want to clarify a few things. I did have the opportunity to speak with Bob Lyons, who's a pretty a property manager and has done that. And he did express a little bit of concern that commercial property can take a longer time. But I think as Daniel just spoke to, and as we've been kind of drilling through, this is not a thing where we're just going to be handing out fines willy-nilly. We have to prevent a future sportsman's and a future friendlies situation. I know that it's come up in my conversation. There's also, just by the way, I'm pointing at Adam Grinold, another guy who knows a little something about commercial real estate here, so he might be willing to answer a few questions about that should anybody wish to interrogate. But sorry to put you on the spot. The other, I know one other person asked me, and I don't know the details behind like the Home Depot location, which has been open for a decade, but it is rumored that is actually still actively accepting rent and is a rented space. So is that considered vacant?
So,
Yeah.
so we would be looking at that as the entire plaza, and currently there are 10 units in it. There are 4, I think, that are vacant, so that wouldn't meet the 75% threshold. So while Home Depot, we stay out of what financial arrangements, that's
Sure.
vacant to me.
Yeah.
But it sits in a plaza with multiple units, 75% of which are not. Home Depot's a really intractable problem that lots of communities across the country are facing with, and this does not solve that.
Right. And which brings me to the point that I was hoping that you just made, was that if you have an open space, but there are other units within that space that are rented and there's activity, this is really not going to pose a problem with this ordinance.
That's correct. Like downtown, multi-unit. So sometimes the first floor is vacant, but the upper stories, offices, residential. If they don't hit that 75%, they're not going to, they're not going to be considered vacant.
That is, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was out there, because I know that some people are concerned that an open space on a main street would fall under this, when that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Peter. I had a similar question. Liz, did you want to say something?
I want to make a motion.
Liz wants to make a motion. I would encourage that.
Okay. I move to adopt the changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Article 6, vacant buildings.
Okay. Do you want to speak any more on it?
I just wanted to say that if you don't like the $1,000, wait a year.
Yeah.
Well, I think, given the explanation of the $800 a day is change, with a better understanding of that, has kind of realigned my thinking around that, because I think that is far more impactful, which will, I think, alleviate your concerns as well. So I'm at peace with that.
Okay, thank you. So the Home Depot property is vacant. It is a vacant building as far as this layperson sees it.
Yeah.
And I think as most people in our community would see it. And people often ask us, hey, what can be done about that? And we kind of say, well, it's sort of like it's maintained in an okay fashion and they're up to date with the taxes and therefore not too much. And so if this ordinance as it's written would give that particular building a pass because it's part of a plaza, I don't know. That seems contrary to what we're trying to achieve here. What are your thoughts on that? And I wonder what Bob's thoughts on that are as well, because I think the clause in the ordinance is on the first page under section 882 definitions, where we're talking about, I think this is what it says. It's a multi-unit building or structure shall be considered vacant when at least 75% of all units of the building or structure are vacant in accordance with the above definitions. Now, the structure or building that we're talking about is a plaza with, I think, like maybe 4 or 5 different businesses. I'd imagine each of them leasing pretty large spaces. When we've looked on it on the town kind of land records map, there's one large parcel with one large seeming structure, but to the layperson, that looks like different buildings. Like, here's the Walgreens building, here's the Hannaford's building. Are we saying that really it's one building?
The two responses to that, if I may. One, with regard to Home Depot, we have the authorized person definition, which talks about having a legal tenant who possesses a valid lease agreement. So I think that answers your Home Depot part of that building. To answer your question with regard to the plaza, if those are, and I'd have to go out there and take a look at it, there are in the parking lot, I think, 2 freestanding buildings, but the large building, Home Depot, Hannaford's, if that's all connected, then that would be considered a building based on the definition here. If there are separate buildings, then we would look at it as any building, is the way it reads right now, that's not continuously occupied by an authorized person for more than 30 days.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're all, I think a lot of those there are connected businesses in one large building. I'm not sure about the one on the far end, but
I pulled the assessor's card. When I looked at it, there's kind of 3 slabs, but it's all connected, one ownership. So I looked at it as, one plaza with 10 units in it, and then there's the 2 standalone buildings as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
we can explore that a little bit further.
Right. I feel like people have been asking for a long time for the town to be able to do something about that vacant building. And so here we are with a vacant building ordinance in front of us that doesn't seem like it would actually be able to do something about that vacant building. So I wonder if there's something to be done.
I think there's reason to think that this still would not necessarily be able to move them to act differently in the case that it applied. My understanding is that they have a contract where they are going to receive rent regardless of occupancy till a certain time, and so for us to add fines on top of that, it might not actually really move the needle for them. But we had not considered at any point doing a square footage based alternative to the 75% for units, And so maybe having an and/or, where if the majority or 3/4 of the floor area of a building is vacant, that we could consider it vacant. Perhaps that would be more flexible and maybe would satisfy that.
It's an interesting.
Liz?
Oh, sorry. I just raised my hand.
I just wanted to mention that a lot of the discussion that Sue has had was that is it a nuisance to the neighboring community?
Mm-hmm.
And other than wishing that the town had a nickel for everybody who had a plan for that building, I don't really think that it's a problem.
Yeah, I hear you. Peter?
All right, then I won't suggest an indoor golf range.
Oh, you can suggest, I'll leave it. Okay. Board, can we hear from the public? Yes, we can. Public, what do you think about all this? Susan, and then Richard. And Patrick, I'm noticing that the ASL interpreter is sort of semi-blocked by the participant list, and that would be problematic, perhaps. Is there something you can do about that?
I will see.
Thank you. Susan.
Hi, Susan Belleville, Brattleboro. So I apologize in advance. I couldn't hear most of the conversation. I have hearing issues with the background noise of stuff that's running. I couldn't hear a lot. So if I'm redundant with what's already been talked about, I apologize.
And you know what, Susan? Feel free to interrupt us. If you cannot hear what is being said, you just let us know and we will do our best to fix that.
Thank you.
At least turn off the heater.
So sometimes I project because I don't want somebody to not hear me.
Yeah.
It feels like this ordinance was drafted in response to specific properties such as Friendly's and the former Sportsman's. And I drilled down a little bit into my world, and I know of situations where there are vacant homes, and I don't know that this ordinance specifically talks about single-family homes that are vacant and have been vacant for years while the heirs decide what they're going to do with this estate property. Mm-hmm. The property looks horrible, but this kind of leverage and this kind of, I'm going to call it punitive ordinance, is highly detrimental to people who are struggling through that whole process. There's also, I know of a home that is been vacant for a while. It was condemned. Nothing's been done about it because it's tied up through various mortgage issues. So no one is giving it a clear mortgage so that it can be conveyed. There's a situation where someone's trying to sell a multifamily home, has purposefully left it vacant so that it would sell easier to a potential investor, and that hasn't happened in over a year. The pricing is not outrageous, it's just nobody wants that particular property. I know of another property where right this minute it is a forced vacant property by health ordinance because of a particular tenant who is still living in the building while we're trying to go through the court process to get them out. It's a forced vacancy. The health officer has said no one will ever live there while these people are still here. It's been a year. And this kind of structure, this kind of ordinance is not helpful to get that property back and viable again. The owner has had the property on the market. He's had several offers, and it's all because we couldn't get this one tenant out, and it's been a year. And he's collected no rents in a year on that property while he still had to maintain it. So I'm just putting it out there. This ordinance seems, because it was structured specifically for, I feel, for several prominent vacant properties, that some consideration was not given to day-to-day people who live in this community who are struggling to do the right thing with their properties. And I'd like to have it reconsidered with input from other people about what the consequences could be for many, many residents about this ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Can I ask you a follow-up question? Do you imagine some exemptions to this ordinance that are not in here that you think would be helpful?
I think that if
You might want to go to the microphone. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
thank
just
you.
because no one.
I think that if a property owner is allowed the opportunity to notify the town that they're struggling through these various issues and what those might look like, possibly with a time frame put in place or expectations put in place, that that wouldn't necessitate the formal fine process and the formal registration process. If they're given an opportunity to put forward a plan, what they want to get done and how they want to get it done. A very short conversation with them or something in writing that says we're doing something about it. It's just taking way longer than we thought it would, and circumstances have developed where we can't do it the way we initially planned, so we have to refocus.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful feedback. Thank you.
Sue, is there something in the ordinance like that?
No, there is not right
Thank
now.
you. Yeah, I mean, you spoke earlier about a good faith effort, and I searched for that kind of language in the ordinance, and I don't find it. Can you point it out to me?
I don't know if it actually is in the language.
Oh, page 73 of the memo. Back up. Section 4. The building safety officer may waive enforcement fees for a property that is temporarily vacated for the purpose of renovations. Has been issued and has vested all applicable zoning permits. So that's clear on renovations. I mean, I felt, when I asked about the properties that you know to be vacant, you did mention some that are tied up in probate. It sounds like Susan's kind of talking about something similar. I'm not a lawyer, so maybe there's some nuances to that. I can think of one in my neighborhood that is sat vacant and is in acceptable condition. And I think Liz pointed out earlier that some of the reason why this ordinance would even exist in the first place is really a health and safety thing. It's not we're trying to bash anybody with a vacant property thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sue, did you want to say something real?
I just want to suggest that we might either make an amendment that accommodates this issue, or we hold it for another month.
Yeah. I'm more in favor of holding it for another month, and I feel like amending ordinances live in the meeting is sometimes a little tricky.
Yeah.
And I'd like some legal advice on it too.
I'm going to take my motion back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear most.
I'm going to take my motion back.
Liz was kind of saying that we might want to wait another month for this and do a little bit more work on it, thinking about some exemptions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. DeGray.
Yeah, Dick DeGray, District 8. I get a little concerned when we talk about places like the Home Depot, which are actually under lease. The building is well maintained. I'm not sure this ordinance is geared towards properties like that. For Bobby, does the town have the ability to take property by eminent domain? Would be one. I feel that going through the process that you talked about by getting a summary judgment, that at some point the town would possibly get money. That could be who knows how long. I don't think that's a win for the town. And there's certainly one building. There's a couple on Flat Street, but the building on Flat and Elm, I don't know the property owner, but I think everybody knows that property, which has been in very poor condition. I think worse than the Sportsman's for years, and it gets to sit there. And I think it might be a brownfield, but I don't know why the town hasn't helped the owner in getting funding, because there's certainly money for brownfields, to get that building taken down. I mean, it's certainly a corner that could have a great deal of activity, And there's certainly, you don't want to see properties improperly punished. Lester Dunkley, who is an icon in this town, has a property. He's retired. Would this ordinance affect his property? Which I would think would be unfair, the way that this is set up. So I would think that your comment about thinking more about this and making some changes, because there's a few other properties that I won't bring up at this time, but making a snap judgment here, I don't think is in the town's best interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Helpful feedback. Okay. Other members of the public with comment on this proposed ordinance? Okay. Coming back to the board then, I feel like where we're at right now is I would personally like to see this kind of have a little bit more time and thought. I mean, I know a great deal of time and thought's already gone into it. I think we've had some good specific feedback. I think Susan's examples of properties that should be concerned about, being impacted by this property are worth a little exploration. What do my fellow board members think about that?
Oh, yeah.
Send it back.
Send it back. Is there more feedback, Sue, that would be helpful to you that we could kind of get tonight? Because we don't want to just send it back with, no information.
No, I mean, I feel I understand what you're asking for.
One thing I wanted to add, and I guess another question that we were sort of wrestling with earlier is what's the right fee? So maybe a little more investigation of that, learning from it, other towns.
Sure.
Presumably there's a sweet spot, and that might differ by community as well,
If I can, I mean, I'm now that I have a better understanding of that daily $800 and that $1,000. I mean, I'm comfortable with that as it's been originally written. Mm-hmm. So for me personally,
okay,
I wouldn't mind though that to see if there's with concerns like we don't want to take buildings by eminent domain. They come out of the tax base when that happens, and that's not good. But maybe some sort of exploration as to like Home Depot. It's a big, huge space that we've all been driving past for 10 years. Is there anything that can be done by that? And if the answer is no, I guess that's fine. As I think everybody points out, it doesn't seem to be a nuisance property. But I think the things like what Dick brought up with Lester Dunkley's place now being open, that would be a shame if that all of a sudden fell under this. But if we're still looking at that place wide open after 5 years and it's become a nuisance property, I think that's what this ordinance is doing.
Yeah, and it's tough being in a small town sometimes, right? And we've all got fondness, I'm sure, for Dunkley's. I have less fondness for Home Depot. It's a large, faceless corporation. And we have a lovely hardware store downtown that's doing just fine. When you take another look at this, one thing I would like to maybe have in writing, and I don't know if this is really appropriate for an ordinance, but a sort of commitment to review the effectiveness or to review the use of this ordinance 1 year after its passage. Mm-hmm. John?
You could make that as part of a motion or a separate motion if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Just to do that.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah. And so maybe we can remember that when it comes back and we do eventually
We'll tell
pass
Daniel
it.
all about it.
Well, this is it, because I'm not going to be here on the board, and you can never guarantee that you will personally be on the board. So I don't want to say I'm making this personal commitment. I'd rather see it in writing that there's a commitment by the town to review the effectiveness of the ordinance. When we passed the security deposit ordinance several years ago, we did kind of talk about that, and if we've done it, it's never been done and then brought into the public. It was also a very weird time and, probably hard to review the impact of that. But I think we should be routinely reviewing the impact of new ordinances that we put on the books to see whether or not they should remain in their current form or at all. Richard?
I think that, at least in my mind, the $800 is an important consideration, but I think we need to look at the permit or whatever.
Yes, the $800 is not up for debate. That's set by statute. So the only real policy question is the fee.
But the fee, even if a building is abandoned and meets, and they've kept it up the way it has to be by statute, just the fact that it's an abandoned building creates a risk, even if it's not, so I still think, I don't care about how high it would go, but I still don't think the $1,000 is enough.
No, and so I think if you kind of come back and take another look at fees and what seems to be a good level, it does sound like I was fine with the 1,000 as well. So I think there are at least 3 people on the board that would be okay with that. We're not taking any action on this right now, so we could always relitigate that next time it comes up. Franz, did you want to say something?
Well, I do have a procedural point.
Oh, fun. My favorite point. Go ahead.
Yes, I know. But I'm also familiar with your total commitment to democratic process.
Sometimes.
So I think what we should do is lay this on the table.
Yes.
It's not really proper to withdraw a motion without a vote, but to postpone it to a future meeting would be appropriate.
That sounds great. Go ahead and make that motion.
I move that we lay this matter on the table and take it up again at a future meeting.
Great. Any discussion on that motion? Okay. Let's take a vote on that motion. And Steve, I see your hand in the air. I think we're going to come back to this. So let me go to Steve for a second. He might have some helpful feedback so that our planning department can take it and.
That was
no.
He's
Okay,
gone.
got it. All right. So then Franz has made a motion to table this until a future date, and now Steve's come back. Hi, Steve. Come on in. If you would introduce yourself and identify which Steve. I got a guess, but we'll see. I think you're unmuted, so go right ahead. I'm sorry, we can see you, but we can't hear you. Can you hear us? I was wrong about which Steve.
I was, I guess, wrong as well.
Yeah. I don't win the dollar that I secretly promised myself. We can't hear you. Steve, if you have feedback for the board about this ordinance, you can email us, and that'll be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So Franz had made a motion to table this until a future meeting. Doesn't seem to be any discussion, so let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's tabled. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your continued work. And we tabled that, and so we're going to move on now to new business. Item A, what time is it? I don't know, my watch just died. It's 20 to 8. Okay, great. So item A of new business, we have BDCC/SeVEDS here to provide us with an update and a funding request. And Adam, you're welcome.
Great, thank you.
Come on up. Got some colleagues with you as well.
Handouts.
Let's see if I can remember names. I'm thinking Laura and
Alex.
Alex. I was like, why don't I remember Alex's name? Getting old. Hi, Alex. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, when you're situated, floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having us this evening. As Alex passes the rest of those out, we are really excited this year to be celebrating BDCC's 70th anniversary, so wanted to share that. The 2 documents that Alex has just handed out, folks on Zoom, one of which is available on BDCC's website, is our annual report. This is an annual report for both BDCC and SeVEDS. And then there's another document that he's handed out, which is a reproduction of the 50th anniversary document, and then with an additional 20 years. So this goes back 70 years and details the work that the organization, really in strong partnership with the town of Brattleboro, began 70 years ago. And if anyone is interested in receiving one of these, they can email us at BDCC, and we'd be happy to put one in the mail and get those to folks that are out in Zoom land. So this evening, Laura Sibilia and Alex Becker are with me. Thought we'd really just leave enough time for conversation and discussion with the board, but present on a couple of topics, which is the SeVEDS-led SeDS initiative, which takes place every 5 years, and then also a lot of the work that Alex has been spearheading through the welcoming community. So I think maybe we'll start off with Alex.
Sure. And, you know, like all things in our work, it's always driven by SeVEDS and the SeDS. And so the SeDS objective, a lot of our work around New Vermonters is really around increasing the size and quality of our workforce and really understanding that our population is where we get our economic and community vibrancy. And so in late 2019, we formed a team as a part of the Working Communities Initiative, a cross-sector group of folks, and that is really where the genesis of our refugee resettlement work here in Brattleboro started. So it's a cross-sector team of a variety of partners that includes ECDC, who are our refugee partners, but it includes folks like Randy from the Mover and Sue Westa from the Planning Commission, folks from SIT. And so it is this group of people who have really worked to welcome our New Vermonters and really focus on the support here in Brattleboro they need to succeed. So a great example of this initiative in action is understanding most New Vermonters arrive without the ability to drive. And so working with Randy to spearhead the microtransit program was a month-long research, employer engagement, community engagement process that we did with Randy as a part of this group to understand, well, what do all workers in this community need with regards to public transportation? And so that is one example of some of the work we've done beyond the employment work, which is what we primarily focus on. And, another great example is we were able to welcome a group of New Vermonters to the library. And so, you know, we've been able to work with the town on language access. You know, we have an excellent town. We, you know, what an incredible resource for our community. How our New Vermonters access it is important. And so it's been really great to partner with like the library to both welcome folks in and get them library cards. And then in partnership with the library, did an online demo of all of the free language resources they have on their website. And so that is something that we can do, you know, it was my idea. It was all of the hard work of our, you know, town and the library doing it, but it was really us all coming together that made something, you know, really nice happen. And so I think that's really emblematic of this Welcoming Communities initiative and really how SeVED's connection to the community is really exemplified in this initiative really specifically.
SeVEDS?
So we are putting the finishing touches on the 2024 Southern Vermont Zone SeDS. That is a federally prescribed process for a SeDS is a it is a 5-year plan. Sorry, Adam, been a long day. SeDS is a federally prescribed process for examining your data, talking with your public, thinking about your long-term goals, and putting forward a strategic plan for meeting those goals and addressing your data in a way that works with the public. So this is the third SeDS that we have brought forward. The second one for the Southern Vermont Zone, that is an area that was created in statute in 2014, and the EDA, Economic Development Administration, asked us to develop a 2-county SeDS when we did that. The first SeDS that we did was in 2014, single county, and that was developed because we knew that the power plant was closing. The nuclear power plant was closing, and we needed a plan to address that. So this project has been underway since the beginning of last year in partnership with the Economic Development Administration, partners in Bennington County. The SeVEDS group a number of public meetings throughout the region, focus groups for specific sectors and industries, one-on-one interviews, and we are just finishing up a 30-day public comment period on the final draft. We've received comments from your town manager, from Bennington's town manager, from other folks throughout the region. We have received a lot of feedback from our SeVEDS committee and members of the public, and are getting ready to send that out to the EDA to be accepted. The reason for doing a SeVEDS, for many regions, it is a requirement for projects to get funding, and so that's why they'll do it, so that their projects are able to get federal funding, certain types of federal funding. We also, it's important for that reason, for our region, we run an annual projects process and solicit projects for implementing the SeVEDS. But for us, we also work the SeVEDS and work the strategies that are in the SeVEDS. As Alex said, the new American community that we have here, we started talking about that in 2014 as, you know, we are a community that is on a long, slow decline. We are getting older, and our economy has been, that was what the data showed us. We have a mismatch in our workforce. We have vacancies in some of our public institutions, like our schools, et cetera, and other places. And we started, that was a strategy that was in our first SeVEDS. It expanded in the 2019 SeVEDS. We spent a lot of time educating ourselves about what does it mean to be a welcoming community. And BDCC really picked that up along with partners and Bennington and helped to move that forward, and now it has taken on a life of its own. Other strategies in the SeVEDS, our first SeVEDS, included, well, you've heard about workforce, just workforce in general, and part of that work was reaching out to our communities who have a shared workforce amongst their residents and their businesses that rely on that workforce, and starting here, coming to Brattleboro and saying, we really need your financial support to help us make that happen. And you rightly challenged us to partner with other towns as well, to bring forward a match. You know, we're the biggest town, but we really need to be matched and see effort from around the town. That effort has grown since, I think that was 2013, 12, 13?
13, 14.
Yeah, to include, I think it's 83% of all residents in the county. And that work, we think, is benefiting the workforce, benefiting our employers, and we are continuing to learn and evolve and innovate on that. So I guess, shall I pause there? Are there other key, there are a lot of different strategies in the SeVEDS. My point to you is we work those strategies. It's a public process by which that's developed. We annually seek projects. We'll be continuing to do that. We've just finished and announced vital projects for this year. And it's my favorite thing that we do at the BDCC. I love hearing folks' concerns and thoughts and ideas and wishes for the future, and feels very hopeful. So,
thank you.
For maybe questions, one other point on the topic that was came up earlier this evening. So the legislature in the state, there's some conversations about a proposed legislation coming this year, which would be for the creation of a development authority. So that doesn't exist in currently. A development authority as envisioned would allow that authority to support municipalities with acquiring properties to ultimately, if it's a brownfield, try to facilitate the cleanup. If it's simply just an abandoned or vacant property, hold that property. It would be empowered, depending on the final version, to take property, to hold property, all for the purpose and the aim of repurposing that property for housing or commercial development. So there may be some more tools coming.
Great. Adam, would you like to speak to the request for funding?
Absolutely, thank you. So over many years, this has been handled different ways. Last year, I believe we came and made the request, and as we do to all communities in Wyndham Region, it's not just the county, we have a few outliers. We make a request for $3 per capita to support the work of SeVEDS. Those funds, as Laura suggested, we have about 87% of Wyndham County residents now contributing to that through the municipal requests. And those dollars go to fund the work that Alex is doing through the Welcoming Communities, that our P3 program, which is working with all 4 Wyndham County high schools. So each year, SeVEDS identifies, and it doesn't necessarily change on a dime. It takes a few years to turn that. But it sets a set of strategic priorities and says, because SeVEDS has no staff, they contract with BDCC. They say, this is what we see is needed in the coming year or years. Please go find ways to implement this. And we then go leverage those funds for other grants and implement those programs.
Thank you. And the request is for $36,147, which is a $3 per person figure for Brattleboro. And that is a question that is before the board tonight. Anything further you want to add before I kick it over to these guys?
No, I think best suited to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, so board, questions or comments? Richard.
I may not be reading this correctly, but I'm looking at your fiscal year 2024 income statement. Does this indicate that you had a surplus for BDCC of over $267,000?
Yes, that is correct. In this page 9 of the annual report reflects both BDCC and SeVEDS. So BDCC is, and this gets a little in the weeds, is different. SeVEDS has its own board, its own budget, has no staff, contracts with BDCC to implement that. So BDCC has its own board, its own budget, has about 750,000 square feet of commercial industrial space that requires far more than $250,000 of additional funds at the end of the year. So that all goes back into future capital reserves and future programming.
Is that amount something that you generally is in the same ballpark every year?
No. We are so dependent on grant funding for the programs that we can do, and grant funding is very lumpy. So, we received a $1 million grant for a 3-year Northern Border Regional Commission work grant, which is for workforce training. So that funds over 3 years, and so you get all that money when you pull it down, but you have to spend it over 3 years. So it is not as simple as 1 year you make money, the next year you lose. That's helpful.
Helpful? Some more? Okay. Very good. Other questions? Elizabeth.
I don't really have a question. I just think that the board should be discussing the fact that we would be proposing to allocate this money from the revolving loan fund, and that, as we all know, is not taxpayer dollars directly. It's not local taxpayer dollars. It's federal money that comes back to the town. And I think this is a great idea. It has been quite controversial. I don't know why. But I'd be happy to make a motion if you're ready for a motion.
I would love a motion.
Okay.
I'd be delighted.
I move to allocate $36,147 from the revolving loan fund to SeVEDS for FY26.
Great, thank you. Anything further you want to add?
No.
No? Okay. I've been on the board long enough to remember that it was controversial. I do think there is a lot of confusion about what SeVEDS is and what its relationship to BDCC is. Sometimes that is what people are hung up on. I think continued explanation of what that is. My understanding, and correct me if I get this wrong, is that SeVEDS is really about a strategy. It's developing a strategy Laura, you kind of spoke to it's developing a strategy and then actually like acting on that strategy. Is that accurate?
SeVEDS is developing strategies over time, really
Yeah.
looking at what are some really big, wicked problems, and pulling together data, and then turning to BDCC and saying, we think this is something that you all should take and execute on, and then they're doing that. And so the work that is supporting SeVEDS, it's ongoing. This workforce work, which we know is continuing to need to be very robust. But yes, is that helpful?
I think that is helpful. And I think, so for the taxpayers of Brattleboro, even though this is not taxpayer money, they're still concerned about how money gets spent. They could know that what we're doing here is funding our part in a larger kind of pie of strategy development around economic development for our region, which BDCC then acts out.
Yes.
Right? Alex, you want to refine that a little more?
And just to say, from a programmatic standpoint, no one really wants to fund building relationships. There's no easy grant to build the kind of relationships that you need to make something work in a rural community. And so rural communities, yeah. And so in any of other communities we work in, to get anything good done, it takes the entire community often. And so, what's funded in often our workforce grants is delivering trainings to individuals, and that's really easily fundable. The amount of time it takes to get 5 different training providers in the room, because we have 2 ELL providers for the different languages that are spoken, and interpreters and translators and employer partners, it's really hard to quantify that. And so that is often how I see where the process of SeVEDS is also capacity building to do things differently and better. And it's why if someone's rent that they're paying to the BDCC, if you told that tenant, you're giving that money so Alex can sit in meetings, I don't know how that tenant would feel about that. But with regards to SeVEDS, that is the work often. It's being present in meetings. It's, we don't really do housing, but we join the Housing Coalition meetings because it's part of the process and part of understanding that work. And there are no one's writing grants for those specific activities, even though the outcomes are often funded by federal workforce dollars.
A great way to understand this is in 2014, immigration was identified as a need, that we would need people. No one in the SeVEDS is not just for our organization to implement, it is for everybody. And so it was the community identified, we need immigration. No one went out and did that. By 2019, we were like, okay, no one's doing it, let's start to get ready for this. And so we used SeVEDS funding and said, all right, we are going to tell Alex he's doing nothing else. This is his job. And by dedicating that resource, we were able to go out and find ECDC and do that work. So it takes that initial commitment and risk to be able to build a program that later manifests itself.
Great, thank you, helpful. Board members, other comments, questions? Franz?
A little bit off topic, I suppose, but I found myself captivated by the story of WheelPad.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you would just take a couple of minutes to tell us about that. And it sounds great. Can't help wondering why it's not in Brattleboro. But
well, probably I can tell you 2 reasons. Yeah, they live in Wilmington.
I know where Julie lives.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's to me, this is the kind of thing that I'd really be looking for to hear more about.
Great, yeah. So Julie and Joseph, WheelPad is a way in which to allow a home, a family to attach a trailer, which doesn't require zoning, to temporarily house someone who is no longer able to utilize the stairs, is wheelchair bound, or otherwise needs that level of service. Once that is no longer needed, that can go away, so it's temporary, it shrinks the investment. It's a great concept. So we are with a sub-3, and we've done this in Brattleboro. We're able to go in and purchase the property for the project tenant, and it's essentially a rent-to-own. All of their payments over the time that they're a tenant accrue to ownership, so they're not wasting money on rent and then having to buy it. So it allows a company who's looking to invest in growth, not have to put it on their balance sheet, the acquisition of the property. And we as an RDC, through statute in partnership with VITA, are able to offer that program so they can then, once they get that revenue to that level, be able to purchase the property for a previously agreed to purchase price.
Thank you.
That's really complicated. Is there some manufacturing component to this? I mean,
There is, yeah. They are manufacturing
Tell
these.
me about that part.
Hey, Franz. Yes. Diving deep into this particular story is interesting, I'm sure, and we're behind schedule.
I would love to. I'd be happy to spend 2 hours with you. I'd be happy to have Julie and Joseph, who would spend 2 days with you, talk more about their program.
Okay.
And the sub 3.
It was present at the small house fair that we had a couple years ago. Yeah. It's very cool.
They've been at this a while.
I'm sure they'd be
and-
happy to have a cup of coffee and talk about it.
Yeah.
Liz has a motion that she made earlier, sitting around waiting for something to happen with it. We want to talk anymore, or we want to act on that motion?
I would like to act on that motion.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. So Liz made a motion to allocate $36,147 from the revolving loan fund to SeVEDS for FY26. Any final discussion on that? Richard DeGray.
I'm never popular, so I want to keep that edict going. I have some issues with BDCC and your yearly sale of your renters doing retail in your space. And I'm extremely disappointed because I think it siphons
Could you direct
people.
it to me, please?
I think it's, well, I'm talking to them. I'm not asking them a question.
It's a meeting
And
of the
so
select board.
I believe that you siphon people off of a struggling Main Street to do business at your building to help your tenants. And I would hope that after this year that you reconsider doing that. Because if you're all about economic development, you're hurting the businesses downtown. And I may not have a store there anymore, but I'm a big supporter of those buildings that are down there, 360. And, you know, they're the places when somebody's looking for a gift certificate, they're going to those places. They're not going up to BDCC. So I hope you reconsider that in future years.
Thank you. Okay.
For the public, may I?
I'm going to move us on.
Okay.
Liz has got a motion on the floor. It's about
I certainly do.
36,147 of your American dollars going from the revolving loan fund to SeVEDS for FY26. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That pass. I didn't see a hand and I didn't hear a voice. Okay, so that passes. Well, that's 4 in favor. Out of practice. All those opposed? 1. So that passes 4-1. Thank you for your time. And at this point, we're going to take a short 5-minute break. So, next item on the agenda is an update from the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, and I think Kate Trescus is going to give us a presentation. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Good.
Going very well, yes.
All right, so you have an update for us.
So I'm here for the annual update with our annual report. You receive those materials as well as our work plan and proposed budget, well, approved budget from our board and membership. And yeah, so we're just excited every year to come and share with you some of the highlights. And this is a particularly exciting time as we are celebrating 25 years as the designated downtown organization. And it's been a great, I think, ongoing 25-year relationship with the town. So a lot of what we've done this past year, as I mentioned last year, we had just finished, I think, our strategic planning process. And so in this last year, we've made a lot of movement addressing some of those pieces in the strategic plan, much of which had to do with the organization itself. in what I kind of like to say, sort of taking what has been a successful working organization, but kind of maturing it into the next level with more systems and procedural pieces. So I definitely want to thank my board and some of the members who are here tonight who have done a lot of work on that. So Eleanor Thomas, Kate Traeger, and Sue Westa, as well as Annie Richards, who were on our governance board and did a lot with that. Promotions, we had another really successful gallery walk season. Our final gallery walk is on this Friday in downtown. We'll have our tree lighting ceremony at 6 p.m. in Plenty Park. Lots of great things happening, and so that continues to be a very strong signature event, as well as Brattleboro and Plaid Friday and all of the campaigns that we do. With design, the flower program is still going. This past year, we worked with Green Mountain Gardening, and I think we'll be looking. It will be continuing, of course, with our flower program, holiday decorations, and it's the second year of the Holly Lights competition. And then economic development. So this was an area that I spoke about last year, had been something that the DBA, we had focused a lot in promotions, a lot in design, but not as much attention in economic development. And so our continued facade enhancement program with reimbursements to folks, we reimbursed over $800 this year. We are continuing our partnerships with Vermont Women's Fund and Vermont Womenpreneurs, and that's been a really successful collaboration and showcase. I participated in some economic development activities as well. And the big one really is the Brattleboro Thrives program. And so we were together, I think it was January last year, with the approval of a 2-year pilot program. So we got to work with the recruitment, and the hiring process took quite a while, actually. We onboarded our economic development coordinator in June of this past year. However, we did not have a successful 3-month review period. And so we've been on hiatus for a couple of months to find another candidate. And so I'm happy to report that that person did start yesterday. And we're feeling really confident about that. And so I'd be really happy to come back in another 3 months to update you on some real progress there. And new businesses continue to come to downtown Brattleboro. So in the last year, we had a successful pop-up with Tavernier Chocolates, who came over from the Cotton Mill, who did a pop-up downtown and who has decided to stay downtown in a chocolate shop, and they love it, love it, love it. Elliott Street has had kind of a little mini revival with some shops, including Verdigris and 3 Ring Traveling Apothecary. Of course, we've got Busy Town down on Flat Street, and the list goes on. Finally, just to give you a sneak peek on what is coming up, I was working all day today at 74 Main Street, Sam's Outdoor Outfitters. We have taken up a lease for the month of December. We are doing 3 weekends of pop-ups of a holiday market there. So really thinking about filling that vacancy in the downtown. It's a big one, especially during the holidays. And so bringing activity and vibrancy, and a lot of folks are really excited. So I think it's just an additional reason for people to come downtown and shop. And of course, they'll be visiting all of the stores on Main Street as well. We Mean Business, again, working through that partnership with Womenpreneurs, Vermont Women's Fund, Center for Women in Business. this is really in thinking about building that entrepreneurial pipeline and resources. We also have a grant this year with Vermont Community Foundation in offering more business resources. And upcoming, we will be doing a mural project on 3 of the black electrical boxes downtown on Main Street. We'll have little mini murals we're calling Spark Street, and also thinking about a restaurant dining promotion. So, always a lot going on in downtown Brattleboro. I just want to say a big thank you to all of our volunteers, of course, the town staff, DPW, Public Works has been amazing. So is Fire Department. Filling those water barricades is huge. Yeah, I think that's where I'll just stop for a minute.
Thanks, Kate. And we do have a motion in front of us, board. It's not, I would say, it was very routine. It's to place an item on the warning for town meeting to authorize the collection of the assessment on properties in the downtown improvement district for $80,000. So we will get to that. But I think really we want to talk about the update and your work. So questions and comments from the board. I'll start. Gallery walk is a joy.
Thank you.
It really is, and has been for the last couple of years, and I think it just gets better and better. It is one of the high points of the month, and it's one of the high points of living in Brattleboro, I would say. And when I have people coming to visit, even just regionally, like people coming up from Northampton, they're like, oh, wow, this is so cool, this is so great. You know, and we've had a lot of negative vibes around downtown Brattleboro recently, but like, that is not one of them. And thank you for, really elevating what was already a kind of like a cornerstone kind of piece of our cultural calendar. And so you've taken that and kept all that was good about that and just really elevated it to something next level. And so thank you for doing that work. And I know that it's a big production and requires collaboration with a lot of folks. And so it's not the Kate production.
It's definitely not the Kate production. I must say a big thank you to Erin Skaggs.
Yes.
And Stephanie Bonin. This was the reimagine of Gallery Walk. And I am delighted to carry it forward and could not do it without Erin and the volunteer team that helps us put that on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And then the Brattleboro Thrives project was a project that we funded last budget cycle for 2 years, which, is a little out of the ordinary for us. I'm glad that we funded it for 2 years because we kind of envisaged that it might take a little while to find its feet, and I guess that's kind of proven to be the case, and that's okay. If you can come back, maybe in 4 months, whatever month that is, April. Oh, brilliant! Come back in April. I'll just sit over there.
Okay.
Or I'll watch it on BCTV, and tell us how it's going.
Yeah, I would love to. So, just rest assured, those funds. So we received half of the funding, and it is sitting in a separate account from the DBA budget. And so, sits untouched while it's not being used, and we're being very responsible with those funds.
I should expect so.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, that's enough from me. Other board members. Peter, then Liz.
So I just can't thank you and the DBA and Aaron enough for everything you're doing to promote our downtown and keep things bright and cheery when sometimes that can be a really heavy lift. So I for one, just want to express my appreciation for all that hard work that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Liz?
Similarly, I want to thank you for all your work, and Aaron and everyone. In particular, I think we should really make note of all the new businesses to downtown because, I think they fly under the radar, and it's quite an achievement. And I think we should support all our local businesses, especially now, especially this weekend. And I think the pop-up's going to be great. And I thank you again for your work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Other board members? Okay. Members of the public? Comments, questions? Adam?
As Adam Grinold, BDCC, we are a member of the Thrive Advisory Committee and just really support the work that's been put into getting this started and excited to see what's coming. So much so, we are so excited that BDCC is now a downtown tenant. So we now have a space on Flat Street and really support the businesses coming down, so much so that we no longer support in any way the Cotton Mill holiday event. That is purely tenants only. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. All right, a little callback. Other members of the public with comments on the DBA update or the use of, the assessment? Okay, seeing none. Board, ready for that motion? Looks like it. Somebody made it. Nobody made it.
You
I
made
just
it.
kind of alluded to it.
Do you want me to make it?
Let's have somebody else make it.
I'll make it.
Peter can make it.
All right. I motion to place an item on the warning for the 2025 Representative Town Meeting to authorize the collection of an assessment on properties in the downtown district in the total amount of $80,000.
Thanks, Peter. You're voting to tax yourself there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing, man.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
At least you have representation.
Any discussion on that motion? Pretty routine bit of business. Okay, so Peter made a motion to place an item on the warning for the 2025 Representative Town Meeting to authorize the collection of an assessment on properties in the downtown district in the total amount of $80,000. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. That will be on the warning. Whether it will pass or not, we'll see. Okay, so let's move on to our next item of new business. I don't know, Kate, are you hanging around for this one, or is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is about Chapter 15 of our ordinances, and we're going to have a first reading of potential changes to the section about the Downtown Improvement District, and Planning Director Sue Fillion is here to present to us.
It's ordinance night.
Yes.
Thank you.
It always is.
Thanks. So, just so you know, some of you might not know, I am an ex officio board member of DBA. It's in their bylaws. There's 2 ex officio non-voting members. There's myself and a representative from the Chamber of Commerce. So I've been on the DBA board for several years now, six maybe years, and have been working with Kate and her predecessor and various board members. And every year we go through this process where the executive director ends up here and, while carefully trying to follow the town's ordinance, the Downtown Improvement District Ordinance. As Kate mentioned, DBA is turning 25 this year. And my guess, I don't know for sure, is that this ordinance dates back to, 1999, 2000, when DBA was formed. So what needed to be in the ordinance then is probably maybe different than what needs to be there now, as it's a mature organization and a mature relationship with the town. So we're proposing a couple of changes to the Downtown Improvement District. Some of them are kind of technical and pretty straightforward, and some are actually as a result of change to state legislation that have occurred as recent as this July. So one of the first kind of technical changes is the boundaries in Section 15.2 mentions the Marlboro Technical Center. I know what that is, but maybe not everybody does, so a suggestion is to replace that with the address of 28 Vernon Street. And then it also kind of describes that as an industrial area, and while it's true that Depot Street still does have an industrial use with the tank farm, that area is changing, and so the suggestion is to delete that. One of the key changes is in the appropriation presentation in section 15
I'm sorry, Sue. We're just going to turn the heaters off so that folks can hear. We will be cold, but we will be able to hear.
Yeah.
sometimes these mics are like amplified and sometimes not. And I'm sure our friends at BCTV have their reasons.
Totally understand. We had Planning Commission in here last night and had to turn them down to be heard. So one of the key changes that we're suggesting has to do with the appropriation presentation. So the ordinance as written requires the downtown organization, DBA, to come before January 1st of every year and include an approved work plan, a budget, how they're going to measure progress, and as well as kind of the previous year's fiscal report. And so what's really difficult about that for DBA is that the $80,000 that they've been requesting from the town that is paid by the property owners in the district is just a portion of their budget. And so they're working kind of up until their new fiscal year in July to kind of put that money together. And so coming up with a budget when they don't have all their funding sources has always been a difficult task. They still do have meetings with their membership and kind of talk about what the request is going to be and all of that. But the requirements in this make it difficult. And so we're looking to move it more towards the presentation that's been done the past couple of years, which is, here's what we've done over the past year. It's what lots of different organizations do, whether it's the bus, whether it's BDCC. They make their requests. They're not actually putting forward the budget of how that money is going to be spent, and that's a challenge. The other request is within that section 15-12, there are a lot of steps in there, or there's a lot of talking kind of about their membership, talking about how the committees are going to do their work plans, how they're going to present it to their membership, who can be a member, all of these things which are they feel like it's DBA bylaw. And at this point, as a mature organization, I can see why these may have been in here 25 years ago, but now we know how the organization works. And I would argue that there are other ways that the town, if the town is concerned with the DBA's work, there's other ways to get at it than spelling out who their membership is in this town ordinance when it's not really something we have much control over. And then two other changes is in section 15-23, there's an odd reference to July 1st, 2005. We don't know why that's in there, suggesting to strike that sentence. And then finally, in section 15-34, there's a requirement in there that says basically every 5 years, prior to the downtown reapplication, property owners need to give an advisory vote as to whether or not they want to continue the special assessment district. That used to be a requirement of renewing your downtown designation. When it was, for a long time, it was every 5 years you renewed it, and then it went to 8 years. And actually this summer, that has dropped. There is no renewal requirement. So this can continue until we want to disband it. So the suggestion is to take out that advisory vote. There'll be other ways to find out if this is working or not. So that's an overview of the proposed changes.
Great, thanks, Sue. And so this is a first reading. We won't take any action tonight, but we will gather feedback and bring back that feedback and incorporate it potentially for a second reading, third, fourth, fifth, I don't know. So, board members and members of the public, let's hear the feedback. Okay, silence says everything's great. Members of the public. Dick.
Well, 1534, I don't think we should remove that. I think that you have to give building owners an option of whether they want the DID, and it's advisory only, to continue. I have, over the past, had views that were not cohesive with a lot of other people, the way this was forced upon the town in terms of payment. But I certainly have, I've let those go. But I think this is something that's important, that you still have a mechanism every 5 years if there is, a change of heart. And most likely it won't happen, but if you do take it out, then there's no opportunity for the building owners to voice their concerns and to get out of the DID district.
Okay, thank you. Kate?
I would just say that annually members vote on the budget, and so all of the DID owners are members, and so they have a voice every year at the annual budget vote.
Okay, noted. Other feedback, comments, questions? Okay. Personally, I think that the changes seem reasonable. I note that it's not so much like we'll never hear from the DBA again. It's more that you'll come back with an annual report, kind of in the style of what you did tonight, as opposed to presenting a budget. And that makes sense to me. Dick's point there, the way I kind of understood it from you, Sue, is there was a change in state statute that governs downtown districts.
Yeah, that used to be required as part of the reapplication process. It's not required anymore, so
okay.
That's why.
So it's not required, but it could still potentially stay in there if you wanted it to. It's not like state statute would mean it's not possible.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Other board members or members of the public with comment on these proposed changes?
I don't really have a comment at this point.
Okay.
It's all kind of new to me. I just wonder if there's some mechanism in place for hearing from other downtown folks. Are we, obviously we can expect them to show up.
I would say this public meeting is certainly one of them.
Yeah. I wonder how many are aware of this. I mean, this sort of was not on my radar. I just wonder how that works.
So the DBA holds an annual meeting every year, and we just held ours in November at Snow Republic, and the public is invited and the membership is invited, and we do our annual budget vote at that time. So I think that there is ample time for input from the membership. We talk to the members all year long about every different promotion and all of the things. So,
have your members looked at this specifically? This ordinance change? Has that been talked about?
The ordinance change with the membership?
I don't believe the membership did. The board did.
The board did.
Particularly the governing committee did.
Would you like it for Kate to communicate with all of the members to say, hey, these are ordinance changes that we're requesting of the select board. What do you guys think?
I think if Kate did that, would be great. I don't feel a need to make that specific request. I'm just trying to formulate an understanding of the whole process that is going on here.
Great. Well, I'm sure that the plentiful news coverage of this part of the meeting will drive people to the second reading, and they will come and they will say, oh no, please do something completely different. Sue, you wanted to say something?
You always give me a hard time for making joking comments.
That wasn't a joke.
That was
that was just what I've experienced in this work. Sue.
I will make a little bit of joke. I think there's probably a handful of people in here that know the ins and outs of this. This is really in the weeds stuff particularly about, the pieces about membership and, who can be, Every year we pull it out because we kind of struggle with the process. Yeah.
When we were thinking about the agenda, we don't usually have the memo by the time we write in the agenda. And so the idea that one of the changes was it would change like the appropriation presentation process. I was a little nervous about that, but really we're still going to hear from you every year. We're still going to get the opportunity for a little bit of public oversight, board oversight. I also do think it's worth recognizing that this is a mature organization now. In the time that I've been on the board, I think we've had questions occasionally about like particular programs that the DBA has run, but like we're not really questioning should the DBA exist.
Correct.
And not to say that that question couldn't be asked and couldn't be asked by its members and whatnot, but certainly sitting on the select board here, I feel like things move pretty smoothly. Okay. Well, no motion. Got a little bit of feedback. We'll see you for a second reading sometime in the future.
Great.
Enjoy your evening, Kate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is the Charter Review Commission. They have a request for our representative town meeting warn-in. Do we have members of the Charter Review Commission wishing to take a seat at the presenters table? So Charter Review Commission Chair, I believe, Kate O'Connor, and Charter Review Commission Member, Hannah Clarice.
Yep.
All right. Repping the law school. Repping the law review.
Yes.
Is that connected to the law school?
Would you like me to give you a brief summary of why we're here?
Yes.
I know you have a memo. We have been, as a Charter Revision Commission, meeting now for, it's hard to believe, 2 years. Yeah. Over those 2 years, we've been reviewing the charter. We have public meetings every month, and now we meet twice a month. And obviously, one of the biggest issues that we have been talking about is representative town meeting, because it's a huge part of our charter. We've had lots of public input about what people think about representative town meeting. Some people think, one way, and there are flaws, or it's working, or whatever. And we're coming to a point now where we need to make our final recommendations on what we want, what we see might be changes to the charter. And through the deliberations of all 6 of us on the commission, it's become clear that, RTM, the way we govern the public's role in governing, it's actually a really big deal. We've been doing representative town meeting now since the early 1960s. And we think it's better for the community to actually let us know what they think. Whether we should keep representative town meeting or should we move to an open town meeting, which an open town meeting, no one's elected. Anybody who's a registered voter can come that day and participate in town meeting. So what we're asking from you folks is to put an advisory question on the ballot for the March 4th, 2025 election. And with the help of the town attorney, we have the language that you have in front of you. And again, I want to stress it's an advisory vote only. It will help us as a commission figure out what we want to recommend. The process here is we make recommendations to representative town meeting, who can either say yes or no. And we thought it was best to really get a sense of what the community is thinking. It helps us, but it also will help representative town meeting when they're deliberating whatever recommendation that we end up bringing forward. And we really won't know that until after March 4th.
Great. Could you read it?
Oh, I can read it. Do we have it? Whatever the article number, it's shall the town of Brattleboro advise the Select Board and the Charter Review Commission to rescind representative town meeting, resulting in an open town meeting, or to maintain representative town meeting as may be modified following recommendations by the Charter Revision Commission. Then you can vote in favor of rescinding representative town meeting, or you can vote in favor of maintaining representative town meeting as may be modified following recommendations by the Charter Revision Commission.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. Board members, anything more you want to say?
Hannah, do you have any?
I just want to make it very clear that we are not asking for the select board to take a position on either of these. We are simply asking that it be put to the town to make this big decision rather than being left up to the 6 members of our commission or the 5 members of the select board.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz, and then Peter.
Thank you for coming. I have a couple questions. I understand that the reason that the town moved to representative town meeting was that there wasn't a place big enough to hold. Do you, if the town were to change that, where do you suggest it be held?
The auditorium, the gymnasium at Brattleboro Union High School holds over 1,000 people.
Okay.
And I think we'd be excited if we could get 1,000 people.
Right. I think that that's one of the biggest feedback that we've gotten is that representative town meeting is currently not competitive. There are often not even enough people running to fill the number of seats for each district. And the likelihood that switching to an open town meeting would suddenly open these floodgates is unlikely.
You never know. Okay, so the second part of your article seems extremely vague to me.
Yeah.
You're asking people to vote on something that is not clear. And so if it's in favor of rescinding or keeping it as may be modified, you don't talk about what those modifications may be. And that troubles me.
Yeah, and and maybe Bob and Patrick can weigh in on this. We have a whole list of things that people would like to see changed about representative town meeting. Some of them are actually things that can be addressed in the charter. Like, do people have to, how many signatures do you have to get on a petition to become a town, get your name on the ballot? How many members there are to representative town meeting? What are the responsibilities of representative town meeting? Those are charter things. Then we have the whole list of things like the meeting's too long, who's going to buy lunch, all those questions that aren't charter related. And what we want to do is, and it's been really hard, and Hannah can tell you like her experience on the charter listening, to the conversation we've had about RTM, is we want to make it clear, and maybe we can work on the language more, but our point on that second thing is saying, as modified following recommendations, we don't want to make the recommendations before we know what people, do people want to keep RTM? And if the answer is yes, then we'd sit down and really talk about, okay, what are those recommendations?
I think that it's been a little bit of this sort of chicken and egg situation where people are coming to us, and a lot of the feedback we've been getting is that there needs to be some sort of changes to RTM. The system as it is now, that there are some ways that it can be improved. And so it's unlikely that we would keep it exactly as it was, which is why we included the language that we would make possible recommendations to modify it. We didn't want people to think that the choice was to keep it exactly as it is or to switch to an open town meeting.
So let me just carry on a little bit. So if one would vote, if the community voted to in favor of rescinding representative town meeting, then would they be voting for Australian ballot, or would they be voting? They're not really voting for anything.
Well, if you read the top part, it says to rescind representative town meeting resulting in an open town meeting. So that's what we're basically wanting them. We want guidance of, do you want a representative town meeting, or would you rather have an open town meeting?
But that should be in the article for the ballot, don't you think? Because it's just so vague, and it's just going to prompt so many questions that I'm sure you don't want to hear. So if it said, rescinding with an open, regular town meeting, that would be a choice that someone could make, and then otherwise they would modify. The other choice would be to modify what we have.
Right. So you're pretty much saying, instead of just saying in favor of rescinding representative town meeting, we'd say in favor of rescinding representative town meeting resulting in an open town meeting, right on the yes, no, as opposed to just the explanation.
Because that then you're voting for something actual, like a proposal.
Yeah.
The other question that I have is if you rescinded representative town meeting and had a regular town meeting, what would happen to the Finance Committee and the Human Resource Committee?
We have, and our plan is if you folks say you're willing to put this on the ballot, we're planning to do a lot of educational. We're going to do a info meeting. We've gone through with the help of the town attorney, and we can share it with you. We did it at a public meeting. We actually have a spreadsheet that has everything that representative town meeting does right now. And we've said, if we don't have representative town meeting, how could we do those? And so we have, could it be done by open town meeting, and could it be done by Australian ballot? And I think pretty much, Bob can correct me, pretty much in every single case, anything that's already we can do at RTM, we can do through either an open town meeting or Australian ballot. So we're not really losing anything.
And when you say Australian ballot, you say that's a town-wide Australian ballot.
Yes.
It's not a ballot within the regular town meeting.
That's correct. And if you notice, we didn't put Australian ballot as one of the choices because basically we all know that the town doesn't want to go to full Australian ballot. I mean, it's very clear to us when people come to our commission meetings that they don't want to give up representative town meeting or open town meeting. They want a conversation one way or another. So, we have that chart that shows everything, pretty much every single thing we do at representative town meeting, we could do through Australian ballot. And we could do it all through open town meeting, but we decided we didn't want to put Australian ballot on this question because it's not what we're hearing people want. They want some form of conversation.
You're leading the witness.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I would just advocate for being as clear as possible so that people have a known choice to make.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed. Peter.
Yeah, so Liz took all the good questions. So, but it did make me want to ask, and it probably just clarifying questions. One of the reasons to possibly, I think you mentioned it already, actually, to rescind the representative town meeting was the difficulty in finding representative members.
Yes.
And you may or may not know the answer to this, and I don't even know how to look it up. Has that always been a problem with representative town meeting, is finding?
Craig Miskovich has actually done pretty extensive research and presented on it in our meetings about the last time that there were competitive races and when exactly those were. I think the last one was maybe 2006, and that was but for one person more than the number of people that they needed to running.
All right, would that be spread equally among? This is strictly curiosity of all the districts, or was that just representative?
One district had one more person than.
So there's always just been a sort of a situation.
Yeah, it's been for a long time.
No, that's not true.
It's not always.
In the 1990s, it was very competitive.
Yeah, it used to be very, very competitive, and it's just been in the last.
And I think it will be again this year.
Yeah.
In the last 20 years.
20 years, it's been the number of people that actually are on the ballot goes down, and we're caucusing more people in.
Okay.
You got a spreadsheet for you right here.
You do?
Yeah.
Where'd you get that?
I was bored a couple of years ago and researched this exact question because it was a burning question several years ago, which is,
I don't know that I'm impressed or disturbed that came up so quickly.
Here you go. Whatever. So I want to say that I don't think this language is ready for approval today. I don't find it clear. I don't find it accessible. And I want it to be both of those things. Because this is such a big question for our town. And the language, as you read it, which is why I asked you to read it, for me, is a little confusing. I've got 2 English degrees.
Welsh.
Your average, no, I'm not very good at Welsh. Your average person in Brattleboro who's coming to vote, they might not really understand this. And that's not to be patronizing to the folks in town. This is an accessibility issue about something that affects our democracy for the entire town. So I would like you to go back to the drawing board. I have some like proposals, but it's like stuff I worked on this afternoon with John. It's not like I labored over it for hours. I don't think it should say shall the town of Brattleboro. I think it should say shall the voters of Brattleboro. Capital T town of Brattleboro means to me like the town as an organization. I think the question needs to clearly state what they're choosing between. What they're advising between, because that's remember this is simply advice, and it's also worth pointing out that it will be advice in probably a fairly low turnout election. The last comparable election was 19% of the voters turned out in 2021. You know, because when we have
done your
do a little bit of homework, you know, recommend it. You know, we can probably predict that it'll be a relatively low turnout election. So that then goes to the validity. You know, we will get advice, but we'll get advice from only maybe 20, 22% of the legally registered voters in this town about a massive piece of our government. And then I also want to kind of bring in the Australian ballot question, which isn't being asked here. And I actually think we should ask it.
Yes.
I know the reasons why the folks who've attended your commission meetings don't want to do it, but I think that's a pretty small sample size of our community, and they have particular interest in coming to those meetings. So I think that we should ask it. We'll get advice one way or another.
Can we just respond to some of those questions before?
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if it's a relatively small percentage of the voters, it's exponentially more than have been coming to our meetings.
No, I understand that.
And
you know, for the record, we have one person in the public right now.
The
Plus,
concern that
Zoom.
we had with presenting more than two options was, you know, if someone voted for Australian ballot, but their second choice would be open town meeting, like how do we, it seemed to get more complicated, and we have not heard any input that anyone that wants to switch to an entirely Australian ballot system, and it seems like the nature of the town of Brattleboro is that people want to be involved. And
that's an assumption.
So what I would, let me read some language changes for you, and like I say, these are pretty drafty. So, shall the voters of Brattleboro advise the Select Board and the Charter Review Commission to change the form of annual town meeting from the current representative model, whereby people must be elected in order to vote, to an open town meeting where any legally registered voter may attend and vote. And that's like, you know, two options. Or a vote on all of the questions before that town meeting on a closed ballot or something like that. I hate the term Australian ballot because, like, I know it's like a technical term, but like your average person on the street, Australian ballot is pretty meaningless to them. I want it to be more descriptive of what the consequences are of like choosing one or the other, right? So, yeah, I just asked you to go back to the drawing board a little bit on that, and we have time. You know, we need to get the warning together by late January. I'm not hearing from the board that we don't want to put this question before the voters. I think that I can say personally, I'm willing to put the question before the voters. I just think the question needs to be worded really clearly.
May I say?
Yeah.
I really applaud Daniel's suggestions, and I think that we also you'll need to have not only what's the article, but an interpretive statement of what you mean by the article.
And maybe an absolute ton of educational events, right? One forum, you know, a forum is sort of like a supercharged commission meeting where we get twice as many people turning up, so we hear from 15 instead of 7.5. You know, so stuff in the newspapers, you know, telling people what it means.
Yeah, and we're gonna do that, and we're right in the works in anticipation. If you do say yes, we already have a date scheduled to do an info meeting at the library with BCTV covering it. We're putting together material. I mean, we're going to go out on an all-out because we recognize the sort of the magnitude of any kind of change that we make that some people have been doing since 1960s. And that's why we actually want the advisory vote. So it's not just six of us,
Understand.
you know,
Yeah,
making this.
I mean, I think it's good to have this vote. I just want the language to be really clear.
And I don't think you should make assumptions about whether people want Australian ballot or not, because you don't know. That should be included.
Richard, and then Bob.
I wanted a clarification because I had talked to John earlier in the week or yesterday about the charter and who has authority, and so if the charter is changed, the select board has no authority in that matter. That's the charter
rules.
Charter review, and the legislature has to approve the charter.
Correct. Want me to
So
answer that?
process-wise, you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, you folks appointed, or the select board appoints the Charter Revision Commission. What we do is we are tasked with making recommendations on charter changes. Those recommendations go to representative town meeting. Representative town meeting either says yes or no. Then whatever they say yes on goes to the legislature, as you said, and it has to be approved by the legislature, and it has to be signed by the governor. And the governor has vetoed a couple of things that are in other people's charters. So it's a process that we have to get to the end. But the select board, in the way the process we're doing it right now, the select board is not.
But there's plenty in the select board that defines what the select board's powers are.
There are 4 ways to amend the charter pursuant to the wording of our charter.
Yeah.
One is by a statutory petition process. The second is the select board can recommend its own charter change, which then, if you passed it, goes directly to the voters to Australian ballot. It does not go to us to representative town meeting for a vote.
But clearly we're not doing that.
The third, well, it is an option, and that was discussed at the Charter Revision Commission as to whether or not to ask you to make a binding article of whether to rescind, because then you'd have an answer on that. But the Charter Revision Commission decided no, ask the board to do an advisory one. The third way, just to fill out the 4, is through a resolution at representative town meeting. And then the fourth is the Charter Revision Commission, which is appointed once, at least as often as every 15 years. And that's the process that's going now. I guess what I'm getting at is, for purposes of the clarity, we talked about the big issue is, do you want to rescind representative town meeting or not? If the answer is yes, then you're left with open town meeting and statutory processes by which you can go to Australian ballot. So it doesn't preclude deciding that at a later point. But for the Charter Revision Commission, for the commission to make recommendations to representative town meeting, they want this advice. But if what you're asking for is ranked, representative town meeting, yes or no, open town meeting, yes or no, or Australian ballot, yes or no, if you can answer that tonight, we can redraft the language so that we have better language for the voters to vote on.
I don't necessarily want it to be ranked.
But this issue,
I didn't hear that we were asking it to be ranked. Is ranked even possible?
No, I'm not confident it is.
It's advisory. Pretty much anything is possible if you're making it as an advisory
Want to try ranked voting?
vote. No. But the point is that the reason we didn't get into Australian ballot and say if the vote is to retain representative town meeting, then the Charter Revision Commission is going to make certain changes. That's why it says as may be changed or recommended by the Charter Revision Commission. But if the vote is to rescind it, then you're going to go to open town meeting. The Charter Revision Commission is going to make certain recommendations. It might change how you do the Human Services or the Finance Committee. Those things still can be part of open town meeting. still part of a charter.
Yeah.
But whether you're going to do it by representation or open is the big issue.
So does this issue have to be dealt with by charter review commission changes, or if it was done, like you said, through a resolution, would that bypass the charter commission?
Yes, if it's done by resolution, which is the third option of how you amend, then that goes actually through 2 representative town meetings and then to the legislature. That's the longest, most cumbersome
Richard,
way.
can I offer? So, like, we put in place this charter review commission, and we have asked them to do a bunch of work, and they've been working on it for a couple of years, and they're working real hard. And I don't think we need to be even thinking about other ways to amend the charter. Let's have this be our mechanism for reviewing and amending the charter. Liz.
I just want to make a note that it's a very interesting proposition that if the vote comes back to have a regular town meeting instead of a representative town meeting, or whatever it comes back that isn't representative town meeting, we will then be asking representative town meeting to dissolve themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And that's just interesting.
Which is why I was stating to you that you have the option as a select board to make this binding, because then you put it to the voters as to whether to rescind or not. So that's a big difference that you just put your finger on.
Well, that's an interesting question.
Doesn't it necessarily need to be decided tonight?
Oh, I don't know, but we can decide.
Come on.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if, Daniel, you were at that meeting. We talked about that because we were in the same thing, Liz. We're going, well, wait a second. The people who are deciding the fate of representative town meeting actually is representative town meeting. So we sort of struggle with that same thing, So that's why a part of this is to advise the 6 of us, but also to advise the 140 representative town meeting when right now we don't know what our recommendation's going to be.
But the select board has the option of making this binding or non-binding.
Exactly.
And that's something that we should consider seriously.
Yeah. And one thing, just so you know, too, and I'm going to bring this up because we're talking about this on December 19th. We're going to have a conversation on December 19th. We're not ruling, and I'm not saying we're doing one way or another. I'm just saying we're going to have this conversation on December 19th of whether we, on the town budget, do we go for Australian ballot on that one thing? So Australian ballot is not totally off the table in the sense that even if we're asking these 2 questions right now as proposed, and we know what you folks are thinking, just because we might go to our, stick with representative town meeting, it doesn't mean we could still recommend on the town budget we want that Australian ballot. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of moving pieces to this stuff. And what we've learned from Bob as well is there are some things that we do at RTM that RTM really doesn't need to do. So that's sort of in this puzzle too. Maybe the modifications of RTM is that why are we spending time doing this thing when we don't have to do it? So this is really like a puzzle that we're trying to figure out, if that makes sense.
It does. So I think we'd like you to come back with some clearer language. I see you once again. Yeah. I actually also want to entertain the question of whether we want to put it on as a binding article.
I do too.
Because I think, and I'm not saying, Hannah, that's a decision we'll make real quick, because you've obviously had some time to think about it. Yeah. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah.
Right? We don't need to make that decision tonight.
I'll just say that the one concern that we have with this, and maybe Bob can speak to this, is that without giving you all of the language, what's actually binding, because we still want to be able to make changes to RTM, right. And so it seemed to get really murky if we made it binding. What was actually binding in there?
Repealing RTM
or not repealing.
And I was looking for synonyms for rescind, because I think that's a word that's not super everyday Joe English.
Repealing would be
abolish.
The clearest, yeah.
Yeah.
Abolish sounds like.
Yeah. Countermand.
Well, we're having a meeting next week on the 19th. Is
2
it-
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm so confused what date it is. Yeah, we're going to meet on the 19th, so we'll put this on the agenda for the 19th and come back. And I know, obviously, I'm assuming that you folks would have us back if you're talking about making it binding, so we can just share our
absolutely.
share
we
our
would not
thoughts.
have that conversation without you.
Yeah. Not that we are the almighty powerful and
No,
we
you
want
should be-
everyone
you
to
should-
do.
You guys have
Yeah.
been given a
Yeah.
task, and
Yeah.
your voice is really important in
But
this.
but not only the question of binding or not binding, but all the specificity that I asked for,
Yeah.
and then Daniel's much more
Yeah.
specific specificity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the Patrick and Bob have been at all of our meetings, so they're very helpful and they know
Yeah.
where we're coming from.
But
and we'll definitely
again,
put this on the warning, right? guys?
Definitely.
Right?
But
one way or
Some way or
another.
another. you know.
I really caution you not to assume that Australian ballot isn't an option, because the few people that you have at your meeting doesn't represent the town
and,
as a whole.
and I think sort of Bob hit the nail on the head with what we're trying to get to is, you know, do people like representative town meeting? It's sort of like we're not asking them all the different possibilities. I know it is. That's why we've struggled with that.
Maybe that's the question. Do you like town meeting?
You like town meeting? We really want it to be sort of an up and down vote. We don't want, we won't want to muddle the waters with a bunch of different options. And just because we rescind representative town meeting doesn't mean that we couldn't, like Kate said, do some stuff by Australian ballot, but adding a third option really muddies the results that we're going to get.
Right. But if it's an up or down vote about like whether you want to keep this form of government or decision making, then it begs the question of, well, what would replace it, right? And it sounds like what would replace it is not quite clear, right? So you can't really get that up and down vote.
Right. Well, we can't really make any of those decisions until we know which fork in the road we're taking.
Yeah. Dick's been waiting patiently, which is great.
Since I'm the only representative here, the public. Bob Gannett's probably spinning in his grave, right, Bobby? To Liz's first question, there's 15,000 registered voters in the school district that get to go to the annual meeting. They probably average, if they're lucky, 100 people. So I'm not worried about an open town meeting. As for Daniel's comment about low voter turnout, you're worried about low voter turnout. Some of you might have been elected with only 12 or 13% of the town going out to vote, yet you're still select board people. So the government is who shows up. And so if you're paying attention and you want this, whatever you want to happen, you got to go and vote. So I'm not worried about the numbers and people saying, well, that's not representative of all the voters. You had an opportunity to vote on it and you didn't show up. So I am a little bit concerned about, we have a charter commission that's been working very hard for a couple of years. And then the board is going to come in and say, we want to make this a binding question. That does concern me because you do have that authority. I'm not sure you should exert that authority and usurp 2 years of work. So I would hope that you would all think long and hard about making that a binding question.
Yep, I can speak for myself that that's exactly what I'd be doing. And I think we'd talk more about it as well before we made a decision like that. Franz?
There's one thing here that's not completely clear to me. I've sort of surmised what the answer to this is, but it doesn't even quite say whether this article would be voted on by the entire voters of the town or just by representative town meeting.
We're asking for it to be put on the ballot.
The ballot.
Election.
On town meeting day.
It says a
which is
proposed article. So as I say, I
So the one from March
surmised
4th.
that it was
It's the warning for March 4th.
Oh, okay, the
Yeah.
date gives it away. Got it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any other
Okay.
questions or feedback?
So
Thank you very much for all your hard work.
it says for the March 4th town meeting, though. It's really.
Yeah, that's what we
It's
call town meeting day.
Day.
Yeah.
It's election day.
Town meeting day,
All I'm saying is
AKA
that should be
Brattleboro
very clear
Election
as we
Day.
go forward with it.
Okay, I think these guys know, I think we know, but thank you. So, and that will take place on Australian ballot, whatever the heck Australian ballot is. Any other feedback for these guys? I think we're definitely willing to put something on the warning. Let's just work on the language a little bit.
Perfect.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, and thank you, folks.
Continued service.
Thank you. Thank you. And just so you know, our goal is to get this done and to the legislature at the end of 2025, so it'll be taken up in 2026. So this is an important piece
Well,
of
some good options.
our little big
Yeah, it's
puzzle.
massive.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, moving on, our next item is potential adjournment. Elizabeth.
I move to adjourn.
Liz has made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Aye, that passes 5-0 by the looks of it. And thank you to BCTV, thank you to interpreters, thank you to town staff. Good evening.
Good.
Another one in the books.
Kate,
Cross
sort
another
of
one
a-
off.
we have to prove
On
that
my
she's
wall
getting
of
this money.